portion of this video is sponsored by Motion VFX. Today, I'm excited to be sharing with you my full review after 1 month of using the new M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro as my main computer. With a new design, the return of essential ports, powerful M1 Pro chip, liquid Retina XDR 120Hz display, and much more. Right away, I can tell you that the Mac is back, and is back better than ever. If you're thinking of buying one of these new MacBook Pros, then this is the video for you, where I will cover everything you need to know. As always, I will leave all the purchase links down in the description. Okay, so to start, let me go over my spec and why I chose it. So I ended up getting the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro in silver with a 1TB SSD. Now, these newer models come in two screen sizes. There's the 14-inch model as well as a larger 16-inch model. Now, with Apple Silicon proving to be so powerful, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go back to the smaller size and get the best of both worlds, having both portability as well as the performance that I need. So I started with the base model, and this comes in at $2,000 and comes with a M1 Pro chip, 8-core CPU, 14-core GPU, 16GB of RAM, and a 512GB SSD inside. Now, this is the one area where I decided to make an upgrade. For $200, I was able to upgrade the storage to 1TB, and this is something that I recommend doing if you plan to use the computer for the long run. I think if you're going to upgrade anything, my advice would be to upgrade the SSD storage. Not to mention that for $200, doubling to 1TB is actually a pretty good value considering that Apple uses incredibly fast storage for their SSDs. And then in terms of color, I decided to go back to silver after previously having space gray on my 15-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. Now, there's two reasons for this. First, I really like the sharp contrast that you get with the lighter computer body and the darker keyboard inlay. I think this looks really nice. And secondly, is that after prolonged use, I noticed on my space gray MacBook Pro that by the palm rest areas, some of the color gradually started to fade from prolonged use and my palms, touching this area of the computer. And this is something that occurs with almost all space gray MacBooks over time. Now, I think the chance of this occurring on the silver model is significantly lower. And that is because the silver color is more close to the natural color of aluminum. So therefore, if there is any fading of that top layer, it should be far less apparent. Let's take a closer look at this new design. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I really like this more modern, squared off design. It feels super solid in the hand, and I especially like this embossed MacBook Pro logo that we get on the bottom here. And all in all, I think this is a design that just falls far better in line with Apple's current design language, and I really like just how modern and sharp it is. Yes, the design is a little bit thicker compared to the previous generation. This does allow for better cooling inside and thus better performance. Additionally, this computer also brings back some functionality by having additional ports. Speaking of ports, as someone who edits videos every day, I am so happy to see the SD card slot brought back. Additionally, having HDMI is nice too, allowing you to quickly and easily hook up to, say, a projector at your university or in a meeting room without having to worry about bringing a dongle that somehow always seems to get lost. On the other side, we also have the return of the beloved MagSafe port. Now, if you do not know what this is Apple's magnetic charging connection and will allow for the charger to automatically disconnect if, say, you or someone else trips over the cable. Having had this on older generations of the MacBook Pro, I can tell you from experience, this has definitely saved my Mac from falling off the table. And then finally, we do still get 3 USB-C ports that of course are very versatile and powerful ports to have. And then finally, thankfully, we do still get a headphone jack for now. Opening up the MacBook Pro, you can see we get this new black inlay with the keyboard that I think looks especially good with that lighter silver color, creating contrast and also helping it set itself apart from previous generations of the MacBook Pro. Now, looking at the top of the keyboard, you can see we no longer have the touch bar. Now, as someone who's used the Touch Bar for several years, I can say that it definitely had its moments, but ultimately it's just not as useful as having simple, dedicated hardware keys that I can find and press without looking down from the screen. Thankfully, they did keep Touch ID. So on the far right of the keyboard, you'll find that sensor allowing you to instantly log in to your Mac. And then in terms of the actual keyboard itself, the scissor switch mechanism is a pleasure to type on. Keys are clicky, have the perfect amount of travel, not being too shallow, but still having that tactile feel and that clicky, satisfying feedback when pressing the keys. Now, looking below that, we get, of course, the trackpad. Now, the trackpad is big, accurate, and truly best in class. Let's check out this new display. Now, this liquid Retina XDR display is truly fantastic. We get these super thin bezels going along the sides as well as the top of the display, and this allows for having a larger display in a smaller form factor. Additionally, having a 120 Hz refresh rate on the display makes everything just feel super smooth, whether it be system animations, scrolling through a web page, zooming, basically any movement on screen is just buttery smooth. The display also gets plenty bright, has high contrast and color accuracy, all things that are important if you edit videos or photos. This, for me, is truly the best display I have. Also new this year, on the top of the display, we get the notch. Now, I've said this before, and honestly, I welcome it. It allows for more vertical screen space and really doesn't get in the way. Now, before I talk about performance, both in gaming as well as video editing, one of the first things I did when I set up this new Mac was install my favorite Final Cut Pro plugins, many of which come from Motion VFX. This is MTuber 3 and M-Channel Clean, two Final Cut Pro plugins from Motion VFX that are a must-have for any creator. These elements make your videos stand out, engage your audience, and help build your brand. MTuber 3 contains 72 time-saving visual tools, including all new call to action presets, social media presets, chapter bars, intros, and transitions. M-Channel Clean includes 60 clean design channel graphics from titles, transitions, intro overlays to backgrounds. You'll probably recognize many of these elements from my recent videos, including today's video. To give a quick example, I'm going to add my favorite title from the M-Channel Clean plugin. I'm going to click and drag it over my clip as normal and edit the text in Inspector. In seconds, we have already applied a beautifully animated title. To take this further, I will add in the zoom elements from the MTuber 3 plugin. I will simply drag this in, reframe, and adjust the zoom. And that's it. MTuber 3 and M-Channel Clean let you save time editing and spend more time creating content. To learn more, be sure to click the links in the description. Thanks again to Motion VFX. Back to the Mac. Here we go. So let's talk about performance on the new M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, in short, the performance on these machines is truly amazing. The SSDs inside have a read and write speed of almost 5.5 gigabytes, and what this means is copying, transferring, and moving data is going to be nearly instant. The computer also boots up faster than ever and wakes up before I'm even able to raise the computer screen. And then on top of all of that, having the 120 Hz display makes everything feel even smoother. Whether you are scrolling through web pages, zooming in and out of photos, or even playing games. Speaking of playing games, I'm not much of a gamer, but I do enjoy Minecraft, and I'm glad to see that this runs very well, easily getting a smooth 60 FPS and will also maintain 30 plus FPS with very far render distance. Now, I wouldn't call this a gaming computer per se, but for casual gaming it is more than enough. Now let's get to work. I spend many hours of each day editing videos in Final Cut Pro. And well, Final Cut Pro has never performed better. It is so well optimized for these new M1 Pro chips, rendering is very fast, working in 4K timelines is truly effortless, and it simply never stutters, even during color grading or having multiple elements applied to a clip. Overall, I would say that editing in Final Cut is anywhere from 2 to 3 times faster compared to my previous mid-range 15-inch MacBook Pro. Now, this is especially impressive considering that the 14-inch model is of course smaller, but also costs $600 less compared to my previous 15-inch model. All of this combined creates for a very comfortable work experience. To add to the user experience, the speakers, webcam, and microphones have also all been improved. Having the better microphones as well as the webcam means you'll be the best sounding and best looking person on the Zoom conference call, especially if you're in lower light. The speakers in particular really impressed me, getting close to HomePod mini level of sound quality. The sound is clear and the bass has some real depth. When it comes to battery life, I found this to perform very well on the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro. Now, battery life is something to consider if you're choosing between the M1 Pro model or the M1 Max model. Now, while the M1 Max model is even more powerful than the M1 Pro, it is also significantly more power hungry, so battery life won't be as good as on the M1 Pro. On average, I found myself getting just about 4 hours of 4K video editing and also around 10 hours in terms of normal productivity day-to-day tasks, such as writing scripts, researching, as well as watching YouTube videos, all of course on max brightness. At the end of the day, I am impressed in every way with this new 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro. I'm happy to have the performance that I need in a form factor that is easy to travel with and take with me on the go. Apple have learned from its previous generation MacBook Pro and have made what I believe to be the best MacBook Pro so far. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, I will leave all the purchase links down in the description. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check out my full unboxing video, as well as an upcoming comparison video in which I compare the 14-inch MacBook Pro to my previous 15-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar in more detail. I'll be sure to leave both videos linked on screen right now. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and take care.